another video. Hold on, let me get my other headphone really quickly. How's your day going? Mine is going pretty great. My birthday is tomorrow. Oh my god. So crazy, I guess. Okay, so let me not waste too much of your time. Let's just get into the nitty gritty and what we're all here for. So, welcome. We are here for the 32nd chapter of the 48 Laws of Power by Mr. Robert Greene himself. Go ahead and purchase his book. Go ahead and pull out your book if you already have one. And yeah, let's get into it. So we are on page 263, Law 32, and it is titled Play to People's Fantasies. So, judgment. The truth is often avoided because it is ugly and unpleasant. Never appeal to truth in reality unless you are prepared for the anger that comes from the disenchantment. Life is so harsh and distressing that people who can manufacture romance or conjure up fantasy are like oases in the desert. Everyone flocks to them. There is great power in tapping into the fantasies of the masses. So let's go ahead and get into the observance of the law. The city-state of Venice was a prosperous, The city-state of Venice was prosperous for so long that its citizens felt their small republic and had destiny on its side. In the Middle Ages and the High Renaissance, its virtual monopoly on trade to the east made it the wealthiest city in Europe. Under a beneficent republican government, Venetians enjoyed liberties that few other Italians had ever known. Yet in the 16th century, their fortunes suddenly changed. The opening of the New World transferred power to the Atlantic side of Europe, to the Spanish and Portuguese, and later the Dutch and English. Venice could not compete economically, and its empire gradually dwindled. The final blow was the devastating loss of the prized Mediterranean possession, the island of Cyprus, captured from Venice by the Turks in 1570. Welcome to the live. Now noble families went broke in Venice, and banks began to fold. A king of gloom and depression settled over the citizens. They had known a glittering past, had either lived through it or heard stories about it from their elders. The closeness of the glory years was humiliating. The Venetians half believed that the goddess Fortune was only playing a joke on them, and that the old days would soon return. For the time being, though, what could they do? In 1589, rumors began to swirl around Venice of the arrival not far away of a mysterious man called Il Bragadino, a master of alchemy, a typically gold through the use of secret substance. The rumor spread quickly because a few years earlier, a Venetian nobleman passing through Poland had heard a learned man prophesy that Venice would recover her past glory and power if she could find a man who understood the alchemic art of manufacturing gold. And so he would reach Venice of the gold and this Bragdino possessed. He clinked gold coins continuously in his hands, and golden objects filled his palace. Some began to dream. Through him, their city would prosper again. Members of Venice's most important noble families accordingly went together to Brescia, where Bragdino lived. They toured his palace and watched in awe as he demonstrated his gold-making abilities, taking a pinch of seemingly worthless minerals and transforming it into several ounces of gold dust. The Venetian Senate Oh my god, he's so cute. The Venetian Senate prepared to debate the idea, extending an official invitation to Bragadino to stay in Venice at the city's expense when word suddenly reached them that they were competing with Duke of Mantua for his services. They heard a magnificent party in Bragdino's palace for the Duke, featuring garments with golden buttons, gold watches, gold plates, and on and on. Worried that they might lose Bragdino to Mantua, the Senate voted for almost unanimously to invite him to Venice, promising him the mountain of money he would need to continue living his luxurious style, but only if he came the right way. Late that year, the mysterious Bragadino arrived in Venice, with his piercing dark eyes under thick brows, and two enormous black mastiffs that accompanied him everywhere. He was forbidding and impressive. He took up residence in the sumptuous palace on the island of the Giudecca, with the Republic funding his banquets, his expensive clothes, and all other whims. A kind of alchemy fever spread throughout Venice. On street corners, hawkers would sell coal, distilling apparatus, bellows, how-to books on the subject. Everyone began to practice alchemy, everyone except Bragadino. The alchemists seemed to be in no hurry to begin manufacturing the gold that would save Venice from ruin. Strangely enough, this only increased his popularity, and following people thronged from all over Europe, even Asia, to meet this remarkable man. Months went by with gifts pouring into the Bragadino from all sides. Still, he gave no sign of miracle that the Venetians confidently expected him to produce. Eventually, the citizens began to grow impatient, wondering if he would wait forever. At first, the senators warned him not to hurry. He was a capricious devil who needed to be cajoled. Finally, though the nobility began to wonder too, the Senate came under pressure to show a return on the city's ballooning investment. Bragadino had only scorn for the doubters, but he responded to them. He had said, he said, already deposited in the city's mint the mysterious substance with which he multiplied gold. He could use the substance up all at once and produce double the gold, but more slowly the process took place and more it would yield. If left alone for 7 years, sealed in a casket, the substance would multiply the gold in the mint 30 times over. Most of the senators agreed to wait to reap the gold mine Bragadino promised. Others, however, were angry. 7 more years of this man living royally at the public trough, and many of the common citizens of Venice echoed these sentiments. Finally, the alchemist's enemies demanded he produce a proof of his skills, a substantial amount of gold, and soon. Lofty, apparently devoted to his art, Bragadino responded that Venice, in its impatience, had betrayed him, and would therefore lose his services. He left town, going first to nearby Padua, then in 1590 to Munich at the invitation of the Duke of Bavaria, who, like the entire city of Venice, had known great wealth but had fallen into bankruptcy through his own profligacy, and hoped to regain his fortune through the famous alchemist's services. And so Bragadino resumed the comfortable arrangement he had known in Venice, and the same pattern repeated itself. Right? Yeah, he actually was scamming everybody. He was like, "Yeah, it works. I swear. Just keep paying me, and I can get you guys. Just trust me." So let's go ahead and interpret the story that I just read. The young Cypriot Mamanuga had lived in Venice for several years before reincarnating himself into the alchemist Bragadino. He saw how gloom had settled on the city and how everyone was hoping for redemption from some indefinite source, while other charlatans mastered everyday cons based on the sleight of hand. Mamanuga mastered human nature. With Venice as his target from the start, he traveled abroad, made some money through his alchemy scams, and then returned to Italy, setting up shop in Brescia. There he created a reputation that he would spread to Venice. From a distance, in fact, his aura of power would be all more impressive. At first, Mamanuga did not use vulgar demonstrations to convince people of his alchemic skill. His sumptuous palace, his opulent garments, the clink of gold in his hands, all these provided a superior argument to anything rational, and these established the cycle that kept him going. His obvious wealth confirmed his reputation as an alchemist, so that the patrons, like the Duke of Mantua, gave him money, which allowed him to live in his wealth, which reinforced his reputation as an alchemist, and so on. Only once this reputation was established, the dukes and senators were fighting over him, did he resort to the trifling necessity of demonstration. By then, however, people were easy to deceive. They wanted to believe. The Venetian senators who watched him multiply gold wanted to believe so badly that they failed to notice the glass pipe up his sleeve, from which he slipped gold dust into his pinches of minerals. Brilliant and capricious, he was the alchemist of their fantasies, and once he had created an aura like this, no one noticed the simple deceptions. Such is the power of fantasies that take root in us, especially in times of scarcity and decline. People rarely believe that their problems arise from their own misdeeds and stupidity. Someone or something out there is to blame, the other, the world, the gods, and so salvation comes from the outside as well. Had Bragadino arrived in Venice armed with the detailed analysis of the reasons behind the city's economic decline and of the hard-nosed steps that it could take to turn things around, he would most he would have been scorned. The reality was too ugly and the solution too painful. Mostly the kind of hard work that citizens' ancestors had mustered to create an empire. Fantasy, on the other hand, in this case, the romance of alchemy, was easy to understand and infinitely more palatable. To gain power, you must be a source of pleasure for those around you, and pleasure comes from playing to people's fantasies. Never promise a gradual improvement through hard work. Rather, promise the moon, the great and sudden transformation, the pot of gold. No man need despair of gaining converts to the most extravagant hypothesis who has art enough to represent in its favorable colors. By David Hume, 1711 to 1776. So, what did you just think of that story? Long story short, he was just lying the whole time. So, let's go ahead and read some of these little red blurbs that are on the pages. So, the first one that we're going to read is The Funeral of the Lioness. The lion having suddenly lost his queen, everyone hastened to show allegiance to the monarch. By offering consolation, these compliments alas served but to increase the widower's affliction. Due notice was given throughout the kingdom that the funeral would be performed at a certain time and place. The lion's officers were ordered to be in attendance to regulate the ceremony and place the company according to their respective rank. One may well judge no one absented himself. The monarch gave way to his grief and whole cave. Lions having no other temples resounded with his cries. After his example, all the courtiers roared in their different tones. A court is the sort of place where everyone is either sorrowful, gay, or indifferent to everything, just as the reigning prince may think fit, or if anyone is not actually, he at least tries to appear so. Each endeavors to mimic the master. It is truly said that one mind animates 1,000 bodies, clearly showing that human beings were machines. But let us return to our subject. The stag alone shed no tears. How could he, forsooth? The death of the queen avenged him. She had formerly strangled his wife and son. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. I really try not to mess up, but not saying it's impossible, but the more that I practice just reading out loud, the better and less mistakes that I make. So thank you, and I hope that when I'm reading it to you, it's like pretty clear and you understand the story. Because sometimes I have no idea. Hey, I have no idea what I'm reading. Like I'm not following. I'm just so focused on making sure that I pronounce the words correctly so that my audience can like understand what I'm saying. But thank you. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. Okay. So where was I? A courtier thought fit to inform the bereaved monarch and even affirmed that he had seen the stag laugh. The rage of the king, says Solomon, is terrible, and especially that of a lion king. Pitiful forester, he exclaimed, darest thou laugh when all around are dissolved in tears? We will not soil our royal claws with thy profane blood. Do is it like you, thou, or thou? I don't know. I don't know how to say it. Do thou, brave wolf, avenge our queen by immolating this traitor to her august manes. Hereupon the stag replied, Sire, the time for weeping. Hey, good, how are you? Is past grief. Oh, sorry, I'm like, yeah, hold on 1 second, guys. This one.
What is more hard?
This one. But that one has a longer eraser. Hi.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Give me a little bit. Okay. Sorry. Where was I? Immolating this traitor to her august mates. Hereupon the stag replied, Sire, the time for weeping is past. Grief is here superfluous. Your revered spouse appeared to me, but now reposing on a bed of roses, I instantly recognized her. Friend, she said to me, have done with this funeral pomp. Cease these useless tears. I have tasted 1,000 delights in the Elysian fields, conversing with those who are saints like myself. Let the king's despair remain for some time unchecked. It gratifies me. Scarcely had he spoken, when everyone shouted, A miracle! A miracle! The stag, instead of being punished, received a handsome gift. But do but entertain a king with dreams, flatter him and tell him a few pleasant, fantastic lies, whatever his indignation against you may be, he will swallow the bait and make you his dearest friend. Fables by Jean de La Fontaine, 1621 and 1695. Like that, I have no idea what I just read. I literally was so confused during the whole story. I don't know if it was because I stopped multiple times or what, but I could not follow that one. Okay, here's another one. So, if you want to tell lies that will be believed, don't tell truth that won't. If you want to tell lies that will be believed, don't tell the truth that won't. Hmm, interesting. By Emperor Tokugawa Ieyasu of Japan, 17th century. Okay, guys. So, let's go ahead and get to the keys to power. So, fantasy can never operate alone. It requires a backdrop of the humdrum and the mundane, and the oppressiveness of reality that allows fantasy to take root and bloom. In 16th century Venice, the reality was one of the decline and loss of prestige. The corresponding fantasy described a sudden recovery of past glories through the miracle of alchemy, which the reality only got worse. The Venetians inhabited a happy dream world in which their city restored its fabulous wealth and power overnight, turning dust into gold. The person who can spin a fantasy out of oppressive reality has access to untold power. As you search for the fantasy that will take hold of the masses, then keep your eye on the banal truths that weigh heavily on us all. Never be distracted by people's glamorous portraits of themselves and their lives. Search and dig for what really imprisons them. Once you find that, you have the magical key that will put great power in your hands. Although times and people change, let us examine a few oppressive realities that endure the opportunities for power they provide. I am listening while at work, and your speech is correct and clear enough. Oh, thank you, Thunder Bees. Thanks. I really hope this is keeping you motivated. And I'm also at work, if you can't tell. Okay, so the reality. Change is slow and gradual. It requires hard work, a bit of luck, a fair amount of self sacrifice, and a lot of patience. The fantasy. A sudden transformation will bring a total change in one's fortunes, bypassing work, luck, self sacrifice, and time in one fantastic stroke. This, of course, the fantasy par excellence of the charlatans who prowl among us to this day was the key to Bragadino's success. Promise a great and total change from poor to rich, sickness to health, misery to ecstasy, and you will have followers. How did the great 16th century German quack Leonhard Thernizer become the court physician for the Elector of the Brandenburg without ever studying medicine? Instead of offering amputations, leeches, and foul-tasting purgatives, the medicaments of the time, Thurneser offered sweet-tasting elixirs and promised instant recovery. Fashionable courtiers especially wanted his solution of drinkable gold, which a cost which costs a fortune. If some inexplicable illness assailed you, Thurneser would consult a horoscope and prescribed a talisman. Who could resist such a fantasy? Health and well being without the sacrifice and pain. So, the reality. The social realm has hard set codes and boundaries. We understand these limits and know that we have to move within the same familiar circles day in and day out. The fantasy. We can enter a totally new world with different codes and promise of adventure. In the in the early 1700s, all London was abuzz with talk of a mysterious stranger, a young man named George Salmanazar. He had arrived from what was to most Englishmen a fantastical land, the island of Formosa, now considered Taiwan, off the coast of China. Oxford University engaged Salmanzar to teach the island's language. A few years later, he translated the Bible into Formosan, then wrote a book, an immediate bestseller on Formosa's history and geography. English royalty wined and dined the young man, and everywhere he went he entertained his hosts with wondrous stories of his homeland and its bizarre customs. After Salmanzar died, however, his will revealed that he was in fact merely a Frenchman with a rich imagination. Everything he said about Formosa, its alphabet, its language, its literature, its entire culture, he had invented. He had built on the English public's ignorance of the place to concoct an elaborate story that fulfilled their desire for the exotic and strange. British culture, rigid control of people's dangerous dreams, gave him the perfect opportunity to exploit their fantasy. Their fantasy of exotic, of course, can also skirt the sexual. It must not come too close, though, for the physical hinders the power of fantasy. It can't be seen, grasped, and then tired of the fate of most courtesans. The bodily charms of the mistress only whet the master's appetite for more and different pleasures, a new beauty to adore. To bring power, fantasy must remain some degree unrealized, literally unreal. The dancer Mata Hari, for instance, who rose to public prominence in Paris before World War One, had an quite ordinary looks. Her power came from the fantasy she created of being strange and exotic, unknowable and indecipherable. The taboo she worked with was less sex itself than the breaking of social codes. Another form of fantasy of the exotic is simply the hope for relief from boredom. Con artists love to play on the oppressiveness of the wording world, its lack of adventure. Their cons might involve, say, the recovery of the lost Spanish treasure, with the possible participation of an all-alluring Mexican senorita and a connection to the president of the South American country, anything offering release from the humdrum. So the reality, society is fragmented and full of conflict, but the fantasy, people can come together in the mystical union of souls. In the 1920s, the con man Oscar Hartzell made a quick fortune out of the age-old Sir Francis Drake swindle, basically promising any sucker who happened to be surnamed Drake a substantial share of the long-lost Drake treasure to which Hartzell had access. Thousands of the Midwest fell for the scam, which Hartzell cleverly turned into a crusade against the government and everyone else who was trying to keep Drake fortune out of the rightful hands of its heirs. There developed a mystical union of the oppressed Drakes. With emotional rallies and meetings, promise such a union and you can gain much power. But it is a dangerous power that can easily turn against you. This is a fantasy for the demagogues to play on. So the reality, death. The dead cannot be brought back. The past cannot be changed. Fantasy, a sudden reversal of this intolerable fact. This con has many variations, but requires great skill and subtlety. The beauty and importance of the art of Vermeer have long been recognized, but his paintings are small in number and are extremely rare. In the 1930s, through Vermeer's began to appear on the art market. Experts were called on to verify them and pronounce them real. Possession of these new Vermeers would crown a collector's career. It was like the resurrection of Lazarus in a strange way. Vermeer had been brought back to life, but the past had been changed. Only later did it come out that the new Vermeers were the work of a middle-aged Dutch forager named Han van Meegeren, and he had chosen Vermeer for his scam because he understood fantasy. The paintings would seem real precisely because the public and the experts as well so desperately wanted to believe they were. Remember, the key to fantasy is distance. The distant has alluring and promise. Seems simple and problem-free. What you are offering then should be ungraspable. Never let it become oppressively familiar. It is the mirage in the distance, withdrawing as the sucker approaches. Never be too direct in describing the fantasy. Keep it vague. As a forager of fantasies, let your victim come close enough to see and be tempted, but keep him far away enough that he stays dreaming and desiring. Now, unless you're driving or handling heavy machinery, close your eyes just for a moment and imagine this. The moon, unattainable, always changing shape, disappearing and reappearing. We look at it, imagine, wonder, and pine. Never familiar, continuous provoker of dreams. Do not offer the obvious, promise the moon. Authority. A lie is an allurement, a fabrication that can be embellished into a fantasy. It can be clothed in the raiments of mystic conception. Truth is cold. Sober fact, not so comfortable to absorb. A lie is more palatable. The most detested person in the world is the one who always tells the truth, who never romances. I found it far more interesting and profitable to romance than to tell the truth. By Joseph Well, aka The Yellow Kid, 1875 to 1976. I'm going to share my thoughts with you guys at the end of the chapter, so let me just read this reversal to you guys, and then I'm going to tell you my thoughts. So, if there is power in tapping into the fantasies of the masses, there is also danger. Fantasy usually contains an element of play. The public half realizes it's being duped, but it keeps the dream alive anyway, relishing the entertainment and the temporary diversion from the everyday that you are providing. So keep it light. Never come too close to the place where you are actually expected to produce results. Thank you. Thank you, Casper. Well, honestly, I don't know if I'm going to keep the title of my stream this. I don't really know if I'm going to keep the title. I've gotten a little bit of controversial flag for it, so I don't know if I should keep the title. Let me know if you guys like the title of the stream, but let me just keep going. So keep it light, never come too close to the place where you are actually expected to produce results. That place may prove extremely hazardous. After Bragadino established himself in Munich, he found that the sober minded Bavarians had far less faith in alchemy than the temperamental Venetians. Only the Duke really believed in it, for he needed it desperately to rescue him from the hopeless mess he was in. As Bragadino played his familiar waiting game, accepting gifts and expecting patience, the public grew angry. Money was being spent and was yielding no result. In 1592, the Bavarians demanded justice, and eventually Bragadino found himself swinging from the gallows. As before, he promised and had not delivered, but this time he had misjudged the forbearance of his hosts, and his inability to fulfill their fantasy provided fatal. Oh, proved fatal. One last thing, never make the mistake of imagining the fantasy is always fantastical. It certainly contrasts with reality, but reality itself is sometimes so theatrical and stylized that fantasy becomes a desire for simple things. The image Abraham Lincoln created of himself, for example, as a homespun country lawyer with a beard, made him the common man's president. P.T. Barnum created a successful act with Tom Thumb, a dwarf who dressed up as a famous leader of the past, such as Napoleon, and lampooned them wickedly. The show delighted everyone, right up to Queen Victoria, but appealing to the fantasy of the time. Enough of the vainglorious rulers of history. The common man knows best. Tom Thumb reversed the familiar pattern of fantasy in which the strange and unknown becomes the ideal, but the act still obeyed the law, for underlying it was a fantasy that the simple man is without problems and is happier than the powerful and the rich. Both Lincoln and Tom Thumb played the commoner, but carefully maintained their distance. Should you play with such a fantasy, you too must carefully cultivate the distance and not allow your common persona to become too familiar, or it will not project as fantasy. So guys, that was a lot. Let me drink a little bit of water and then I'm going to tell you my thoughts on this chapter. Okay. So, I'm honestly someone that does not like to lie. Now, with that being said, have I lied before? Yes. I tell the truth probably like 97% of the time, and then there's that 3% of the time where I do lie. I'm not perfect, and I'm not going to say that I always tell the truth because it's not the truth. But I really hate lying, and like when I lie, it kind of just sometimes gives me anxiety, right? And a lot of people lie all the time, lying is just second nature and stuff. But in this book, the 48 laws of power, it talks about how like you lie in order to create a persona, in order to like get to what you want to get to, in order to achieve what you want to achieve, right? But once the lie catches up with reality, obviously, you know, as we just read, Bragadino, he got executed. So with that being said, when you lie, it's like you always have to find another lie and another lie and another lie and another lie in order to cover up the original lie. And then when you tell the truth, sometimes the truth is harsh and it's cold and there's facts and there's nothing else about it. So sometimes I dibble dabble and I'm like, oh my God, well, should I be telling the truth all the time? But honestly, when you sit here and you tell people the true thing all the time, people don't want to hear it. So, with that being said, what is the point of me saying all this? I would say just be very careful with your words. And when you want to lie, be really smart about what you say and remember the lies that you tell. And yeah, everything that's done in the dark will always come to light. And whenever you continuously lie to people, you are going to get karma. To lie in this manner, it seems one would need to be kind of desperate. I mean, in that scenario, in a Bragadino like case, I feel like he was lying so he could get the riches, and he was like, okay, well, I have to keep lying in order to keep funding this lifestyle and to keep being the person. Cause, and then once he was like getting caught with the lie, he was like, you guys don't deserve me. I'm going to Bavaria or wherever he went. And yeah, he continued to lie and it ultimately ended his life, you know? So, I mean, but at the end of the day, would we even remember Bragadino if he didn't lie? Will we even know this story about this guy if he didn't lie? Probably not. We wouldn't even know who Bragadino is. But like I said, lying can get you in certain rooms, but the reality will always come out. The reality will always come out. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily about like, because you can make the truth sound good, better. Like you can embellish it a little bit, or not embellish it, but you can make with the way of words and like if you know anything about sales, how salespeople are, they make the truth sound better. They make something and they turn it. So when somebody is just super blunt and direct about something, it cuts a little bit harder. But when you're like you have a way of words and you can still say the truth, but it's like not as harsh or it's a little bit nicer. That I feel like can get you a lot further because one, you're not lying, it is the truth, and you're being honest. Yeah, it sounds a little bit nicer, it's not as harsh, but you're able to get stuff done and like people could take your word. That's a big thing for me. Like because at the end of the day, we talk to communicate. And if you can't take somebody's word because you know they're gonna be a liar, I wouldn't want to do business with them. I can't take your word. I can't trust anything you say. And trust is the most important thing. So yeah, guys, those are my thoughts. If you guys want to tune in for another Hot Girl Reads, the next chapter will probably be on Saturday if I am able to. If not, then I will keep it posted. But just turn on the post notifications the next time I am on live. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.